In this episode of the Red Delta Project podcast, I'm going to be going over the interesting origin story of the RDP and how I went from a gym-going iron worshiper to calisthenics enthusiast relatively quickly and haven't looked back since. Hello there, my name is Matt Schifferly. I'm an inventor, author of books like Smart Bodyweight Training, founder of the Red Delta Project, which is your resource for simple and efficient diet and exercise tips to enhance your health and fitness without compromising your quality of life. And I get questions a lot. What is Red Delta Project? Why did you name it that? How did you come to this type of approach with health and fitness? You used to lift weights, but what made you change over to calisthenics? And all these questions like this. And admittedly, RDP is very different out there. And the reason why it's different from a lot of other approaches to health and fitness is because the history behind it is very different. For me personally, I didn't grow up like a lot of other exercise enthusiasts. I didn't grow up playing a lot of sports. I didn't have an uncle that showed me how to deadlift. None of my friends liked working out. Back when I was younger, in the late 80s, early 90s, in the upstate reaches of Vermont, we had more cows than people. Gyms were unheard of. And if you wanted to get exercise, you helped the farmer load in the hay. You didn't exercise for the sake of exercising. And working out was kind of a weird thing that you did. So I didn't have a lot of influences around me telling me how to exercise or work out smart, or that it was even a viable thing. So for the first 10 some odd years of my, quote, training career, I didn't have a whole lot of areas to turn to. I did, however, know that I really liked somehow exercising in order to change myself. Because I was a premature baby, and for the most part in my youth, I wasn't very strong, wasn't very fast, no coordination or athletic skills, so I was always kind of the low man on the totem pole when it came to athletic prowess. But when I turned 10, I joined Taekwondo, which is the first time I got regular athletic instruction on how to do something. And in my early teenage years, that's when the bell really went off, and I was like, you know what? I'm sick of being weak. I'm sick of being the low man on the totem pole. If I apply myself with this Taekwondo thing, I can get bigger and faster and stronger and build some self-confidence. And boy, did I like that idea. So that's what I did. All through junior high and high school, I dedicated myself very much to Taekwondo. But there was a caveat to my involvement in it. It did all that things, but I also realized that the better the results that I wanted, the more I had to invest of myself, my time, my money, my energy, all these sorts of things, which is to be expected. You want more, you have to give more. But I recognized that came with also an increase in stress. But more importantly, an increase in dependence. I was more dependent upon my instructor. I was more dependent upon the instructor's class schedule. I was more dependent upon the school that I was going to. Could I get to class? Could I make the class times, work with my school life, and working with a part-time job? So I started to notice that my drive for better results meant spending more, and spending more was harder to do exponentially with a normal teenage lifestyle growing up. So this is a theme that persisted throughout my life, all through high school and college. The more I wanted, the more I would invest, the more stressful it would become, the more I recognized I was dependent upon something external other than myself. Therefore, I wasn't the one in control of my health and fitness. In college, I started working out at the university gym because that was the first time I had access to gym equipment. I started to race bicycles for UVM as well. And every time I changed what I was doing, I thought, this is great, this is the solution I've been looking for, only to find that it made me realize that, well, I can do this as long as the weather holds out, as long as the gym is open, as long as it works with my schedule, as long as some other factor in my life. So by the time I had graduated college, I realized I want to work out, I want to be in control, but I'm not in control if someone else is in control of my resources to be able to exercise. So one of the first things that I realized in order to get out of this and to build more independence over my health and fitness was I started to work at a place that sold home fitness equipment. And at first I thought that was the ultimate solution because I thought, this is it. I'm going to build a home gym. Therefore, I don't have to depend on a gym. I don't have to depend on the weather. I can work out anytime I want. Therefore, I'll be in control of the equipment. control of my workouts and therefore control of my health and fitness. But as soon as I staffed my apartment with as much equipment as I could, I even got rid of my bed and just slept on the floor to afford more space, I realized now I was dependent upon that equipment. Now I could only move to places that had enough room for all of my gear. And it wasn't like that gear was everything I wanted either. At the time, my workouts were very much dependent upon like a bodybuilding approach. So I needed 20 different curl machines and every different chest exercise you could possibly imagine. So simple home equipment wasn't going to cut it. So at this point in my life, I was like, you know what? I'm sick of not feeling like I'm in control and like I'm always trying to tiptoe my life around my health and fitness habits. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make health and fitness the focal point of everything about my life. I'm going to dedicate my life to it, my career to it, my social life to it, everything in my life. I'm just going to throw everything towards eating right and exercising. So what I did was I quit the job at the place that sold fitness equipment and I became a personal trainer at a local gym. And at this point, gyms were becoming more mainstream in Vermont, so I didn't have too much trouble getting a job there. And I thought, this is the solution. I can work out here. I'm always around all of this top grade equipment. And I'm around people who get my dietary approaches as well, because that's the other thing, is I never felt like I could control my diet because I always had to eat right. But of course, mom and the cafeteria at the gym wouldn't prepare things that were kosher for my diet. So I was always stressed about that too. So I thought, this is the ultimate solution. I'm going to work in a gym all day, every day, and that's going to be the way for me to finally take control of my health and fitness, which worked okay. It was all right for a few years, but at this point, I was in my late 20s, early 30s time frame, and I was starting to really honestly get pretty sick and tired of the whole thing. Pretty darn burned out because I was giving everything I had towards diet and exercise. And I was getting beat up, my joints were achy, my motivation was down, I was burned out, and I just felt like I can't keep this up anymore. I'm spending everything I have towards this. I can't travel around the world or do anything I want because I'm dependent upon this gym. I'm dependent upon my diet to stay lean and healthy. I still have all of this dependence. And I almost gave it all up. But there were 3 big influences that came into my life that totally changed everything around. The first influence was a CD that came across my desk one time. This is what we listened to music before we had streaming music, kids. But it was based on a lecture on something called intuitive eating. And intuitive eating was this mind-bending approach to healthy eating, which basically set me down the path that I am now with the whole healthy eating approach. And the idea was you don't have to become dependent upon dogmatic approaches to eating anymore. You don't have to be on a diet. You don't have to follow the rules. It's very simple, basic stuff. Things like listen to your body, eat when you're hungry, try not to eat too much when you're not hungry, eat until you're full, give yourself treats, eat nutritious whole foods, all these sorts of things, right? Nothing rocket science, but for me at the time, it was mind-bending because it said, for once, instead of trying to become more dependent and stressed out in the name of results, becoming more independent and autonomous about your diet is the way to better results. Totally flipped the script on me. And at first, it was absolutely terrifying for me to try this because for years, I've been thinking I have to depend on a diet to stay in shape. I have to become dependent and follow the rules. And now you're telling me to break the rules and I'll be fine. It's like saying, jump off the cliff and I promise you won't fall. But I tried it because I was desperate. And lo and behold, after the next couple of months, boy, was that a relief. I felt better, I looked better, I performed better. Everything about it was much, much better. And that started me thinking, this is fantastic. Independence as a method and philosophy for health and fitness. This is everything I want, right? So after really getting my feet wet with it when it came to dieting and nutrition, I started to think, well, what can I do about this for exercise? How can I apply this in my workouts? And that was when the second influence came across my desk by this guy by the name of Zachary Evanish. And Zach Evanish, now he's a big household name, he's world famous and stuff, but at that time, he was just cutting his teeth with internet blog posts and videos with his underground style of strength training. So here I was in this big, massive gym, needing all of this equipment that I had to depend on in order to get a workout in, long workouts, every exercise under the sun to attack every muscle from every direction, right? And here he was saying, we're going to do squats with a log in our arms, and that's going to be our leg workout. And it was totally mind-bending for me to think we can do less and get more. And we don't have to depend on the long workouts and the fancy equipment and the gym memberships and the dogmatic approaches to exercise. So once again, I thought, let's start playing around with this. Let's start to think, can I get strong legs without 20 different leg exercises? Can I be stronger and in shape with these simple approaches to health and fitness? And lo and behold, it started to work pretty darn well. And I started to really think, this is it. Independence and autonomy and not having to depend on things that we all were told was so darn important is the way of the future. So at this point, I started to develop a little bit of like what I call my adolescent rebellious years in my fitness career. I created a website called thefitrebel.com. I started posting YouTube videos and blogs, and basically, like a bratty teenager, I was going out and saying, all right, you know how we're told we need to follow this rule and we got to follow that rule and this is all so important? Basically, I was trying to just tear everything down. And I thought it was liberating to know that I didn't need to do all this stuff. So that's what I based all my information on, was I'm just going to flip the bird to most everything in the fitness industry and bitch about it and complain about it and say how we've got to rebel against it, fitrebel.com and all that. And that's going to be my calling. That's going to be my brand and my identity when it comes to health and fitness, which felt very cathartic for me. I felt great doing it because I was letting a lot of angst out. For years, I'd been stressed out about all these things I had to depend on and rules that I thought I had to follow. And now I knew I didn't need to follow all these things. So I was just bitching about it left and right. But as you can imagine, calling out and complaining a lot doesn't exactly win you too many friends in health and fitness. At one point, that whole paleo thing started to come out, so I started to rally against it. And of course, anybody who's a fan of it started to debate me a lot on like the YouTube comments and stuff. And I would fight back and like, you're an idiot, you don't know what you're talking about and all that sort of thing. Really immature kind of stuff. Till one day, I had a guy write me an email, and he wasn't even harsh about it, but he basically called me out saying, you know, you've kind of got a good thing going, but you're not really doing anything. You're not doing anything productive with your approaches here. You're just basically bitching about things. And if you want to really improve people's lives, build something rather than all this bitching and complaining. And of course, at the time, my little ego couldn't handle it. And I was like, you screw you, bastard, blah, blah. But it hurt so much because I knew it was absolutely true. I was complaining a lot, but I knew I had to build something. So I took everything down. I took down fitrebel.com, took down all the YouTube videos, newsletter, everything went goodbye. And over the next couple of weeks, I thought, that's it, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I gave it a shot. I don't know what I'm going to do. And I was kind of depressed about the whole thing, to be perfectly honest, because that was my drive. That's what got me up every morning. Now it was all gone. But then I started to think about it from that other perspective of maybe I should build something. Maybe I can build something that's more productive. The problem was I had no idea how to do that. I had been using the term fitness independence in newsletters and things like that because I knew that breaking away from dependence was the key, but I didn't know what that exactly entailed. And people even asked me, they're like, so how do you achieve fitness independence? You talk about it, how do we do it? And I'd be like, I honestly have no clue. I do not know whatsoever. So on one side, I was thinking, I've got to build something. The second side of me was like, you have no idea what you're doing. This is the real honest truth that hurts so much. You don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you're trying to accomplish here. So I was like, well, I got to get a website. I got to get some sort of videos. I got to at least start looking on the positive side of things, of what we can do and get the ball rolling. But I don't know what that's even going to be called. I don't even know how to do that. So at that time, I was a big Linkin Park fan. And one of the neat things about the Linkin Park name was that they too had been struggling with a similar thing where they got together and they started making music, but they didn't know quite what their style was going to be. And they didn't know what their name was going to be. And they had a couple different names like Hybrid Theory that they were playing around with, But they were like, how are we going to have a set name that represents our style if our style and approach is always going to be changing and evolving? So at the time, across the street from the recording studio, there was a park called Lincoln Park. So they thought, why don't we just take a nonsensical, mean-nothing name like Lincoln Park, because there's a million Lincoln Parks all over the country, and we just call ourselves something that doesn't mean anything. So that way our music defines the name rather than the other way around. And then they changed it to a K rather than the conventional spelling so they could get the domain name. That's how you got Lincoln Park. So I thought, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a name that doesn't mean anything. And that way I'm just free to build whatever I can. It'll change and evolve over time. And yeah, hang on now. I don't quite want it to mean nothing, because at that point I did know that the approach that I was going to take meant following desire, passion, doing what you want, and simplicity and efficiency in the approach. So I started taking different symbols and colors and things that represented these ideas, and that's how I ended up with Red Delta Project. Red meaning strength, desire, and passion, and Delta meaning simplicity, efficiency, and change. And then Project to emphasize this idea that it's this constantly evolving deal, Red Delta Project. So I had a name, and therefore I had a foundation, and I started to build. But then I thought, how simple can I make this stuff? If all these things that you come to depend on say that you don't need this anymore, what do you need? What is necessary? And that was the one question that sparked everything. Instead of looking at 1,000,001 other things that you don't need in order to be in shape, I started to go down the rabbit hole of asking myself, what is the 1 or 2 things you do need? And this is where I started to discover the principles of fitness, the natural principles that govern health and fitness independence, which I eventually wrote my book, Fitness Independence, on. So all is hunky-dory. This is where things have been building ever since then. But where does calisthenics come into this whole thing? Well, I'll tell you. When I started to get much simpler and more efficient under the ideas of underground strength training, I started to wean out a lot of exercises, particularly machine-based. And one of the approaches in underground strength training that I had come across was the use of natural implements, stones and logs and rocks and things like that. So I thought, you know what? Part of the reason I bet my body feels like crap all the time and I'm not getting what I want is because I'm not using my body in a natural way. I'm doing all these artificial exercises and using artificial means. I bet if I did it more naturally and lifted natural things with natural exercises, then I'd get better results and less aches and pains. So I started working out with logs and I started working out with rocks. And I'm not talking Atlas stones and like strongman logs. I'm talking actual logs and rocks I'd find out in the forest and in riverbeds. And boy, was that a big game changer. Because I went from saying I need to do 1,000,000 different exercises to all I've got to work with is this rock at my feet. And immediately I started to realize that when it comes to using external resistance, there's only 3 main ways that we can use an external piece of equipment without any other unnatural apparatuses. We can pick it up, we can carry it, and we can push it overhead. That was it. That was all I was doing every single workout, because I didn't have a dumbbell rack. I didn't have a squat rack. I didn't have weight benches. I didn't have nice handles that I could hold on to things and do 20 different tricep exercises. It was all pick up, press, and carry. And if you look at a lot of the more modern methods of strength training, things like kettlebells and Olympic lifting, it follows along this pattern. It's pick up, carry, and lift overhead. So I started doing that for a number of months, and it was good, but to be perfectly honest with you, it really didn't feel like it was fitting the bill for me. It was too simple, kind of boring. I didn't really know where it was going to take me. I was like, I still want more for this. So again, I turned to underground strength training, and Zach was talking about this interesting book that had just come out called Convict Conditioning. And then I'd read bodyweight books before that, and I was like, all right, yeah, sure. Everybody says you can get in shape with bodyweight training, and nobody ever backs it up. It's always a disappointing venture. But when I read Convict Conditioning, I realized this was very different because it was actually a progressive approach to bodyweight training. That was always what was missing, was the progressive aspect to it. So I started to play with it a little bit, and I thought, I'm going to make myself a challenge. I'm going to go 1 month And I'm not going to touch any sort of weight. I'm going to do just body weight training. Because again, I was feeling really beat up and sore and burned out. I'm like, I'm going to do just body weight training for 1 month. And maybe it'll give me some rest and I'll heal up, but I doubt I'm going to get much out of it. Well, by now you know the story. I thought it just totally turned my world around. Everything about my health and fitness and strength, especially in my legs, lo and behold, went through the roof. By far, better than ever before. But I still wasn't totally convinced. So for the next several months, what I did was I thought, all right, I'm going to use body weight training along with my natural organic lifting. And that was, again, you see this a lot with very present popular things like CrossFit and stuff. I even looked into CrossFit for a bit. I went to Las Vegas and got my $2,000 t-shirt over the weekend, right? Thought this was it, but it's like, no, it's still too dogmatic, too dependent kind of thing. So I backed away from that one. So for the next several months, I was lifting in the gym, and I was doing dumbbells and stuff, but still along the ideas of organic lifting, because I was using things like dumbbells, but no racks, no benches or anything, just whole natural type movements like deadlifts and cleans and presses. But I was filling in all the gaps, of which I thought there were a lot, with bodyweight training, with the convict conditioning methods. At the same time, I had come across this idea called suspension training. TRX was starting to finally come out a little bit. I had a suspension trainer from Monkey Bar Gyms, the Jungle Gym, the first one that ever came out. And I was like, you know what, this is pretty neat because I can basically mimic almost any sort of weight machine out there, but with a body weight approach with this suspension trainer. So those three things I kind of mixed together to create this method of approach to fitness where I was not stressing myself out. I felt like I could work out anytime, any place, anywhere. I didn't depend on anything, but I could get a great holistic natural workout in. And that's like, this is fantastic. This is what I've been looking for all along. But over time, what ended up happening was I started to go more into the bodyweight style of things. I'd be like, yeah, I don't feel like pressing today. I'd rather do handstands. Or I would be like, I don't want to do heavy lunges today. I'd rather do pistol squats. So I started to just wean away from the weights, not on purpose, but it just sometimes happened that way. Plus, like there was the gym I was working at, but across the street from where I was living was a playground. So for my workouts, I'd just go to the playground and I'd work out, but I didn't have anything heavy to lift over there. So I would get into the other types of movements like bridges and stuff to supplement. Eventually, I was like, you know what, Matt, you're pretty much just doing the bodyweight thing. Would it be possible, again, this is over a year after reading Convict Conditioning, would it be possible to get in good shape with just bodyweight? That question finally came to head on me, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to make this a shot. I'm going to do nothing but bodyweight training. I'll probably master it in a few months, and then I'll go back to the weights and stuff and progress from there. Well, of course, it's now been like 10 years afterwards, and I'm no more closer to mastery now than I was then. Hell, I'm probably even further now than I am now was then because of how much more I've learned of how much I don't really know, right? So ever since then, it's been body weight, not because I ran away from weights, not because I wanted to get away from that sort of thing, just because the freedom and the autonomy and the independence, not to mention just how good I feel with bodyweight training, has always been so high up on the list of what I'm looking for that that's just the path I'm on. And who knows what the future may bring. Things may change very much down the line. There could be another form of training out there that's even more independence and autonomy out there that I don't even know about. Who knows? But for right now, this is where the Red Delta Project is we rely on progressive calisthenics training as our foundational approach to exercise, healthy eating approaches for dietary approaches, and of course, fitness independence philosophies to still give you the freedom and flexibility to do whatever the hell you want so you never have to become dependent on anything as far as your health and fitness for the rest of your life. So there you go, the short history of RDP and how I made the change from lifting weights to calisthenics training. Let me hear from you, reddeltaproject@gmail.com or down in the comments section if you're listening to this on YouTube. I love hearing from you. I'll talk to you guys next week. Till then, be fit, live free.